She's Amy, I'm Gary. Just to be clear.
I'm the manager for Diamond at CDN, and I was responsible for writing the second cut report, which is in your delegate packs today. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of Diamond and kind of go through a few of the headlines, and then I'll pass over to Gary, who's going to talk about how at Sky you're using Diamond data. Is that right? Yep. Okay. So just for those who don't know, what Diamond does is it collects diversity data from people working on and off screen on UK television productions. And the strengths of Diamond, I would say, the main strengths are firstly that it enables broadcasters to collect data in a consistent way, and more importantly that data can then be aggregated so that we can get cross-broadcaster data or industry data. And because we can gather those larger sample sizes, it enables us to analyse that data in different ways. We can compare on-screen with off-screen data, scripted with non-scripted. We can look at data across genres, and eventually, once we get the samples we need, we can look at role types as well. So Diamond is definitely about data, but it's not just about data. The project itself is really a commitment by the main broadcasters to making real change in the TV sector. So first of all, I think it's about a commitment to a data-led approach to making change. It's about collaboration, so it's about competitors coming together to find a way of thinking about diversity together. It's about long-term monitoring. If you read pretty much any diversity or inclusion report now, it talks about the importance of long-term monitoring, and that's exactly what Diamond is doing. Sometimes people think about Diamond in terms of it kind of being a barometer or taking of the temperature, and I don't really kind of think that Diamond is that kind of weather forecast. It's not about what was the diversity weather for Channel 4 last week. It's akin to kind of monitoring climate change. It's about recognizing when those seismic shifts are happening, when that kind of irreversible change has happened in the industry. And finally, it's that commitment to transparency, which I think we're going to hear a lot about today. So the broadcasters are committed to us publishing the industry level data, and that's where I come in at CDN. We at CDN are the proud custodians of that industry level data. We've published 3 reports, the last one of which was the second cut. It's in your delegate packs. Please read it. There's a quote from somebody called Jim Barksdale, who was a former CEO of Netscape. He says, if we have data, let's look at the data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. My opinions aren't that great, so we'll cut to the data. Killed it. There we go. So I know this is about data today, but I thought I'm not going to sit here and go through loads of data, so I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for you. So here's a couple of charts that are in the second cut report. If I haven't mentioned, it's in your delegate packs. Please have a look. And just quickly, before I start, I just should say there's 2 charts here. Diamond can kind of cut the data in 2 different ways. The first way is that it can look at all the diversity forms that it's collected from people, and then break down the diversity of those people, which is what you see in the top chart, chart 1. The second way is to consider the contributions or the TV credits that are related to those people, and then to break down the diversity of those. So the top one is definitely about people working in the industry, and the bottom one is about the contributions that they're making. So that's more about perhaps kind of airtime or the impact. You might want to think of it in that way. So there's a lot of kind of findings in the second cut, but there's just a few things I just want to kind of mention really that I found most interesting. The first is, of course, when the data first came out of the system, it was kind of like, well, you know, where is the real underrepresentation? And the Diamond data is showing that is really occurring amongst disabled groups. So people who are disabled are most likely to be underrepresented in the sector. I think if you look at the tables at the back of the second cut, I don't think there's a single data point across any genre, on screen, off screen, where the representation by disabled people in any way reaches the kind of national population or workforce statistics. After disabled people, I think it's the over 50s where we see the most underrepresentation. There are some genres where there's an exception to that, but that is an exception rather than the rule. And the reason why I found this kind of interesting really is that having come from outside of the TV sector into the TV sector, and when I took on this job quickly looking at the kind of the diversity data that was available in the TV industry, I saw there was a very, very strong focus on gender and ethnicity. So for the first kind of tranche of data coming out of Diamond, to kind of encourage us to look more broadly beyond gender and ethnicity towards other protected characteristics, I think is really important and means that Diamond is really doing its job. The second thing I wanted to talk about was about on-screen and off-screen. It's very clear from the data that we've got that we're seeing better, I don't like you saying better diversity, but we're seeing better representation across the protected characteristics on screen compared to off-screen. This is probably most noticeable when we look at the ethnicity data. So the black lines are, the black bars, I should say, are on screen, and the dark pink are off screen. I hope you can see it in this light. But yeah, for on screen, here we are, might as well touch it. If we look at the contributions here, for black and minority ethnic people working on screen, we're kind of exceeding this national statistic that we're comparing it to, whereas for off screen, it's definitely below. The third thing, it's coming back to this individuals and contributions point again. So when we did this, we weren't quite sure whether we'd see much of a difference. And when you first look at these two charts, they look quite similar. So it is interesting to see where there is a difference and to consider why. In terms of, again, if I look at ethnicity, if you look at the ethnicity of individuals up here, there is kind of quite, black and minority ethnic people are quite well represented in terms of individuals, but in contributions it's much higher. But the opposite is true when we look at people over 50, where we have fewer contributions but more people working in the industry. So it's kind of interesting to consider what's actually happening here. And wondering why there is a difference when it comes to those, but perhaps not with other protected characteristics. So that's just a few thoughts that I've got from my kind of analysis of the data, but I encourage you all to please read the second cut, look at the data tables at the back, try and think about what questions it poses for you. And now I'm going to hand over to Gary.
Thanks, Amy. Yes, so this whole project has been a very interesting journey for all of us. Amongst the leadership of the broadcasting industry, we thought it was time to start naming and shaming ourselves on this subject, and to do so on an evidence-based methodology, and we can't do that without data. That's just a sad reality. We can't do it without data. It's been a very pleasant surprise the extent to which everyone has been committed to this. I remember when the first Diamond data came out, a couple of us said, "Oh my God, we can't publish this, the numbers are terrible." But that's the whole point. And it was evident to all of us that we had to publish, we had to be transparent, and we had to start having a dialogue with the community, with the industry, and to internally name and shame ourselves. We wanted to avoid, of course, the possibility of turning into a competitive, pardon my language, pissing contest between the broadcasters, and I think we've managed that quite well. But as an industry, to hold ourselves accountable. And on that, I should, if I may, just give a bit of shout out to James Currell, who's now the chairman of CDN, doing a great job leading that in his new role, but also in particular to John McVeigh, who chaired CDN through the most difficult days of its journey, and particularly the difficult early days of Diamond. I really enjoyed Marva's little talk, because she said a couple of things that really rang very clearly to me, and I actually wrote down something she said: doing good is good for the bottom line. That's absolutely true. My CEO, Jeremy Darroch, often says, not only is this the right thing to do, it's also good for business. As a pay TV company, my most important KPI is this thing we measure called content worth paying for. Now, if we don't deliver content that is representative of the entire community, we will fail. So it is genuinely good for business and also the right thing to do. So let me show you a couple of things. We've started to publish data, as we've said. This is from the second cut document that Amy referenced, and I wanted to highlight two things here. Down the bottom, this disability position is really not good enough, where the 17% of the UK workforce is recorded as having some level of disability, whereas the individuals that we're reporting under Diamond represent just 5%. That's simply not good enough. The other thing I would point out about the BAME numbers, the Project Diamond data, it starts to look okay. It's 12.8% versus 13% of the national population. Problem with that, of course, is almost the entirety of the UK broadcasting industry is based in London. And the diversity data in London is very different from the national average. So that number is not the right number to chase. And Marva also mentioned the concept of aspirational goals rather than quotas. We agree with that completely. We've set ourselves goals. About 2.5, nearly 3 years ago, we published targets under the BAME category of reaching 20% both on camera and off camera. And these are some of the data points from the second cut. So we're ahead of our 20% target with on-screen roles. We're at now 28%. If I may just do a little promo here. Last night at the RTS Awards, very proudly won Best Drama and Best Writer for Lenny James's wonderful Save Me series. So very happy about that. Especially positive in comedy. So we've gone very aggressively into comedy. Just so you'll understand our programming strategy at Sky, it's very simple. We want to be more audacious than free TV and more local than OTT. And that has helped drive us very aggressively into the comedy category. And our diversity data on comedy is going very well. So Amy talked about the off-screen part of this, and this is something that we really need to do a whole lot more work on. We are way behind in some of the categories. We hope at the national level in Diamond Cut 3, which we'll publish in about November probably, where we'll be able to split it not only by broadcaster but also by roles. So you'll be able to see the inclusive position on roles. Now I can tell you one role that's going to be really disappointing is writers. We have got a lot of work to do in development and training of young BAME talent and bring them up that curve. So we are now, we've improved a little bit. We've gone to 15.5%, way short of our 20% target. So 15% of the senior writers on our productions are of BAME backgrounds. We've got a lot of work to do to reach that target. We will not reach that target without investing in young talent. And that, to me, that is proof of the value of Diamond, is to be able to understand the different categories, different roles, where we are way behind where we need to be. So the big learnings that we're taking from Diamond are proving to be very important. First of all, as you know, the UK broadcasting industry is very heavily reliant on its relationships with the independent production community. So we need to encourage indies to follow our lead on this. Now we're being a little bit bullyish on this with indies, with carrot and stick, by insisting that they put BAME people into senior roles. The danger, of course, is that you bring a lot of young BAME talent into the entry level of the industry, but that's not going to help, because we need to make sure that we get representation all the way up to decision making, and that's the challenge. And because we've been so underrepresented for so long, that's proving difficult and time-consuming to develop people and give them opportunities and encourage them to build their careers up that decision-making ladder. So we're doing this very effectively, actually. We're insisting that that each of our indies put BAME talent into senior roles. And if it's impossible, for whatever reason, we insist that a senior BAME person is attached to a senior person and shadows and learns the craft. And for example, it may be that a particular director is critical to a particular production. We will often say you have to have a BAME director attached to you, and the BAME director must direct on his own at least one episode. That's the kind of change that we're pushing through this. We need to continue to encourage personnel to participate. In our data, we now have 30% of our population on both sides of the camera participating in Diamond. It's not enough, but it's statistically sound. Deborah and Amy have done a lot of work on this, is understanding how robust is the data, how credible is it, and we've had multiple internationally recognised statisticians analyse the numbers, and we're confident that the data is valid. That participation is a really critical part of the workload at Diamond. To encourage the indies and talent agents to support Diamond, that's something that we push very hard, again with carrot and stick. And the other point I wanted to make is that something very important we've learned is the critical nature of anonymity. Sometimes people have said to me, oh, you're not publishing program level data because you've got something to hide. Damn right, we do have something to hide, and that's the identity of the participants. We will not publish program level data because when you look at program level data, you can start to identify individuals. That is a very dangerous thing. If we broke that promise we made about the anonymity of the data, we would be betraying the tens of thousands of people who have already participated in Diamond, and it will discourage people from participating in the future. So the anonymity is absolutely critical, and I make no apologies for the fact that yes, we do have something to hide, and it's the identity of the participants. So with that, I just want to summarise Sky's position is, yes, there are little bits of progress, but my goodness, we've still got a lot of work to do. And I think that's probably fair to say that that's a pretty good summary of the Diamond experience. Thanks very much.